Welcome to the Teaching Journeys podcast, hosted by Dave Roberts. Humanity possesses a unique skill, the ability to pass knowledge from one generation to the next. This podcast embraces that ability, offering learning opportunities through conversations with extraordinary guests. Dave aims to leave a positive mark on individuals around the world. So before you dive into today's episode, please share this podcast with your network, including friends, family, and colleagues. And please consider leaving a rating or review. Your support makes all the difference.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Teaching Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Dave Roberts, and today it is my pleasure to have as my guest Serena Mastin. Serena is the founder of Pulse Marketing, an award-winning agency she launched in 2013. With more than 20 years of experience in marketing and leadership, she's known for her thoughtful, story-driven approach that helps brands connect in meaningful ways. In addition to her work in business, Serena is an author and speaker. Her memoir, Exposed, You Can't Heal When You Hide, reflects on her personal journey through abuse, addiction, and loss, offering encouragement to others navigating their own healing. As a single mother, advocate, and entrepreneur, Serena's work is rooted in a desire to help others find their voice and move forward with clarity and purpose. Serena, welcome to the Teaching Journeys podcast. I've been looking forward to our conversation for some time now.
Thank you. It is an honor to be here.
And we have to give a shout out to Steve Ramona. Steve is a master podcast conductor. He's a superb podcaster himself, and he enjoys hooking up individuals that he's had on his show who he thinks would be a good match for other shows. He introduced me to you. We talked, I got more and more familiar with your story, and we thought, yeah, let's do an episode. So here we are today recording.
Yes, I know you were a little skeptical at first, but I won you over.
You did. Sometimes I'll come into a situation with some healthy skepticism, and I think that's good
That is
because
good.
it gives both parties an opportunity to kind of really take a look at the situation, and
Yes.
skepticism allows that to make sure we're a good match. But I think my skepticism probably alleviated in about 5 minutes of talking with you. So with that being said, my first question for you is, tell our audience about the major experience or experiences that have shaped your life path.
Okay, it's a big one. I have a few bullet points. So I'll start from the beginning. My biological father was the leader of a satanic cult, and he sexually abused me and took my innocence before the age of 5. My mom was really trying to get us out of the cult, but there were tape recorders and people following us. And so by the time that she did, she had to earn her rights back as a parent. And then I was put into witness protection in multiple foster homes. By the time I was 15, after being reunited with my mom around the age of 12, by the time I was 15, I was independent. And I ended up leaving home at the age of 15, living on the streets for about a year and a half, and put myself through high school with 3 jobs. I struggled with addiction and all of the other things that you face when you're living on the streets. By the time I graduated, I climbed the corporate ladder and I met my husband, Kyle. And being married for 10 years, starting the agency, we both worked in the agency. On the outside, we looked like the power couple, but behind the scenes, he was struggling with mental health issues, multiple infidelities. And when I found the courage to leave him in October of 2019, by March of 2020, he committed suicide. And then my last bullet point, once I healed, moved forward, rebuilt the business, and finally found love again, I met Thomas, and we had been together for 4 years. And unfortunately, on February 20th of this year, he unexpectedly passed away due to a enlarged heart. And he was swimming laps in the pool, and the enlarged heart created some sort of chaotic heart rhythm, and he lost consciousness in the pool and drowned. That is the high level.
Yeah, those are quite the bullet points.
Yes.
I assume now you're not in witness protection,
No, no,
because I kind of figured if you were, we wouldn't be doing
we
a
wouldn't be
video.
doing
So,
this.
but boy, you were from the age of 5. You experienced all kinds of loss. Or you talk
Yes.
about losing your innocence at the age of 5, and that's a loss in and of itself. It's a loss of childhood as we know it. And then your survival skills must have been really intact for you to survive a satanic cult. And sometimes if people don't understand, it's not easy to leave once you're in.
Yeah.
Somebody could say, well, why didn't you just leave? Why didn't your mother just leave? It's not that easy, particularly when there's the threat to life and limb.
Yes.
There are consequences for leaving. When somehow those individuals who are in their cult convince you that you can't live without their knowledge, without their guidance. So it's like, I think, very similar to an individual who's been a victim of domestic violence when they're asked, well,
Yeah.
you should just leave. Well, it's not that easy, because a person who's the abusers has maybe threatened to kill them, kill their pets,
Yes.
hurt their children, if for any reason that they leave. At 15, what was the turning point? What made you finally say, Serena, that I need to get out of here?
And so, my mom had worked so hard to turn her life around. And she had become my very best friend when we were reunited when I was 10. But having that much trauma and independence before the age of 10 created a lot of resistance. And so she was trying to now create rules, and I had resistance. And in that, I chose to leave. And my mom knew at the time, as hard as that was, that she had to let me go, because I just had this built up, you know, frustration, anger, energy. And in that, I had to really create my own path. And so most people at 15 have not gone through any of the things that I went through. So they're a lot more apprehensive or innocent or naive to what's out there. And I just had no fear, in the sense of also not really thinking of the consequences. But my mom is my very best friend. So through all of it, she has loved me unconditionally, and she has forgiven not only herself, but also forgiven me. And we've grown together.
That's fabulous. And, there's a line from a song by Sting is, if you love someone, set them free. And
Yes.
free spirits are not meant to be reined in. They're meant to be guided. They're meant to be allowed to spread their wings, but knowing that they can come back to their caregivers and talk with them, or even come back and live with them if things don't work out. And my daughter was like that. She was a free spirit, and we tried the traditional parenting, rules like grounding her if she missed curfew, but that didn't work. So
No, the more resistance, the more push.
yeah,
And there becomes like a pressure cooker
yeah.
until it just kind of explodes.
So we learned to work collaboratively with her, in terms
Yes.
of, if you're going to go into the situation, let's talk about the pitfalls. Let's work that out. Know that if you're jammed up, you can give us a call, and we'll come and get you no matter what time it is. That approach seemed to work better than the kind of tough love approach. And individuals who are free spirits don't respond to that. They tend to resist that.
Yes.
So the two losses, I know your husband, Kyle, and your significant other, Thomas, am I
Fiance
correct?
Thomas.
Yeah,
Yes.
Thomas. Those two losses in many ways had to be traumatic. Can you talk a little bit more about the grief experience after your husband died by suicide and Thomas died suddenly of
Yes.
heart failure? What were the similarities in your grief journey? What were some of the differences that you saw?
So they were almost night and day experiences. And my husband, Kyle, brought a lot of chaos. And although he had a magnetic personality, what that sometimes creates is a whirlwind of all kinds of emotions and different, obstacles. With Kyle, we were together for 2 years, and we actually did a destination wedding in Napa. We blended our families because I had 2 children and he had one. And about 2 weeks after we returned from our honeymoon, a woman walked into my office, sat at my desk, knew my name, described my house and my children, and said that she had been with my husband for over a year. And that was the first time that I had found out that he was unfaithful, 2 weeks after we were married. So you can imagine the devastation that kind of goes into that, and then rebuilding. And so it took several years for us to rebuild that relationship. But then when we did, a few years into the relationship, it happened again with another woman. So this chaos was constant. And I'm trying to launch a business, my marketing and advertising agency. He's working in the business. We're scaling the business all while this is happening in the background, and we're raising 3 kids. And so by the time it got to that level where where I had the courage to leave, it was because I was deteriorating and I knew I needed to do it for me. And what happened when I left is that whirlwind of chaos that he had created, it almost felt like it inflated even more, to the point of where, when he did take his life, there was another woman in the house with him at his new place. And they had gotten into an argument. She called the police. And right as the police walked in, he shot himself in front of the officers. And so that emotional trauma and grief had a combination of a lot of intense feelings of anger, sadness, like I couldn't save him. So that I tried for 10 years to try and support him, save him, forgive him. But then the other side of it felt relief, like a calm after the storm.
Mhm.
And then on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, when Thomas came into my life, he brought so much joy, adventure, and exploration, and going on these fun little, morning hikes to watch the sunrise, riding bikes, and just brought me so much joy that when he passed away unexpectedly, it was like I lost my joy. And I had to then spend the last several months reigniting the joy within myself. So yeah, the complete end of the spectrum. Kyle took his life at the age of 34, and Thomas passed away this year at the age of 36. So just even the age was a weight to carry.
We talk about loss that defies the natural order of the universe. We could talk about the loss of a child. We could talk about death of a sibling, but there's also young widows, there's young widowers whose spouses and significant others die at a young age. And, none of us, I think, ever got married thinking we were going to bury one of our spouses before we reached our silver years.
Yes.
So I think probably those two factors in terms of, having to deal with, well, geez, how do I understand the order of laws in the universe now? That had to be something that you also had to really deal with and negotiate. Am I correct?
Yes. The other piece of that was I was 6 years older than Kyle, and I was 9 years older than Thomas. So there was also this feeling of this was unfair that I wasn't taken first, like
Yeah.
in that regard. But then I think the other part of this experience, and there's nothing that I could have done differently. This is not a curse. And I just happened to be the common denominator in two very tragic situations, but there was nothing that I could have done differently to change those outcomes. And so I had to look inward and really go through my own personal healing, because that's the first thing you go through in the grieving process is, what could I have done different? Or, self-blame.
Yeah, and we go through that, I think, with any loss. It's like, what could have done to prevent this? What could I have done to see my loved one's cancer sooner? What could I have done to
Exactly.
take care of his or her, their mental health needs better than I could have? Why didn't I anticipate that? Well, mental health, particularly, and again, I don't know Kyle's background, but the behavior sounds like there was a manic phase to it. It was almost like bipolar disorder, because one of the characteristics of bipolar, particularly in the manic phase, is they have very impulsive sexual relationships. And they have a very, I think, high thirst for sexual activity. And I think that's part of the disorder. Not that it excuses the infidelity, but it certainly gives some context to that.
Yes.
But the other thing you mentioned, and yeah, you felt relief. The fact that he was no longer struggling with mental health issues, and perhaps relief that you didn't have to deal with the constant ups and downs with that. I want to make something clear to the audience. Relief doesn't mean you grieve any less. You still grieve, but you're relieved that that person is no longer in emotional pain or physical pain. Whenever I've companioned anybody through grief, Serena, I've never said if it was a loss due to cancer, another type of terminal illness, or suicide because that individual was struggling with mental or physical concerns, I would never say to a person, that must have been a relief that that person
No,
has died. Because
never.
no, you would never say that. But if you said that to me, then I would go there. But I would validate that, yeah, I could understand that it was a relief, but it doesn't
It
negate the
doesn't,
guilt. No,
minimize the pain.
no.
And it took me a long time to even find the courage to say that word,
Yeah,
because you hold a lot of guilt around it. Like,
yeah,
why am I feeling this way?
yeah.
But once I recognized that when your nervous system is in fight or flight for that long, not just the 10 years that we were married, but since I was basically born, my
Mhm.
nervous system has constantly been in this fight or flight. And then being with someone that created a lot of circumstances that elevated that. When I did finally step into the healing process, it was almost like I was exhausted because my body had to relearn how not to be in
Mm.
fight or flight. And I had to learn how to regulate my nervous system.
What has helped in terms of you regulating your nervous system now?
I think the biggest things that really help me are the learning self awareness, number one, self management. So knowing when it happens, what to do. And then also the self regulation is the practice. It's when you're in those elevated moments, using tools and techniques to bring yourself out of that so that you can have clarity before making decisions.
Yeah, it makes sense because, I mean, yeah, you were in fight or flight since you were 5 years old, living under the
Yes.
constant stress of meeting the demands of a satanic cult, being out on the streets and trying to figure out ways to survive and make it minute by minute or day by day. Yeah, that's going to put your cortisol levels right off the map. You
To
get,
learn how to regain that
Mhm.
feels impossible. It almost feels like it's a woo-woo, warm and fuzzy thing that doesn't exist. But I started working with the Heart Math Institute, and they monitor and regulate your heart rate and teach you how to really focus on your breath
Mhm.
to lower your heart rate, to slow down the heart rate in those moments where you're elevated,
Yeah,
and breathe through it and then shift and refocus your
yeah,
energy.
yeah. Even just doing focused breath work, when you could feel like the relief internally, and your
Yes.
parasympathetic nervous system is now starting to become more calm, more regulated. So there's a lot to be said for breath work. Sounds like there's a lot of meditation that's also involved in the work that HeartMath does. The other thing, I've recently got my level 1 certification as a Usui Holy Fire Reiki practitioner. And I've been
Oh,
practicing Reiki consistently for the last 7 weeks. And I can tell the calming effect it has on just my stress levels, my clarity. And Reiki involves really meditation as well, too, when you're doing the self Reiki. So I think anything that meditation, yoga, Reiki, anything, any similar holistic
that
practices
brings you into the moment
brings you to
because
the
we have a
moment.
tendency to live in the past or live in the future.
Yep.
And we create stories
Yep.
that start to spiral out of control when we're
Mm.
stressed or when we feel like someone has hurt us. And
Mhm.
because of that, it then continues to accelerate the nervous system into that fight or flight. But when you get into that space where you can bring yourself back, I think that's where I've noticed the most powerful shift.
Yep. And the stories we create are a product of early experiences. And you had some very traumatic early experiences. So
Yes.
So I could just imagine the stories that were created as a result of that, or what you told yourself as a result of those experiences, particularly after you were sexually abused at the age of 5.
Yes. So when I wrote my book, the titles of every chapter were all of the self limiting statements that I had told myself throughout my life.
Hmm.
And so it kind of gives you an outline of those challenging stories that you have to fight through. And you have to create new experiences so that you don't connect to that story again and your body doesn't hold on to it.
Tell us the title of your book again.
Expose, you can't heal when you hide.
And I like the fact that you have your chapters set up according to those limiting beliefs that you had bought into, based on the experiences that you had. And I would suspect that one of the things you probably talk about in the book is ways that you can reframe those beliefs so that the behavior that you're engaging in becomes more productive, more healthy, and you teach individuals how to not buy into what their early experiences have told them.
So that's my next book. But this book, I was taught by my book coach. And when you're writing a memoir, you have to bring people into that moment. And so I actually bring you into the moments that I was facing, the raw, unfiltered moment from when I was 5 years old, all the way throughout my life. And so the reason I did that is because the next book doesn't just show you how to heal, but it gives validity to the experiences that I've endured in order to offer my insight.
Yeah, it makes sense that you can build off of that. The first is setting the stage, the second is giving more specific tools. Let's shift gears for a second. Pulse marketing, I know that's a big part of what you do. Tell us
Yes.
how that evolved in 2013, what you do as far as what the mission of pulse marketing is and the impact that it's had, globally.
Yeah. So I was in corporate America for 17 years. I actually bought my first house at the age of 23. So through all that I'd been through, I still had some great wins along the way. And I was a VP of marketing, gosh, when I was 29. So I had really, climbed the corporate ladder with determination. And so my mom said, well, if you only put a quarter of that determination into your own business, there's no way that you wouldn't be successful. I said, yeah, yeah, mom. You have to say that. You're my mom. You love me. I get it. And she's like, well, if you're not going to do it for you, do it for me. And I said, you are so manipulative because I'll do it for you and I won't do it for myself.
Mhm.
So that's how the company was born. My mom actually named the company. And for the first few years, I hated it. I thought, oh, this is dumb. I'm going to get a job. I like a paycheck. And what I recognized is that we're at the heart of creative. We pour our hearts into everything that we do. And so pulse marketing made so much sense. And this looking in hindsight, my mom knew all along. And so we are a full service marketing agency. We're all in house. We don't outsource overseas. And we have a unique model because you get chief marketing like oversight from me personally. And a lot of times that's strategy, that's research, that's who's your target audience. to creating a plan, and then my team executes. So we have designers and writers and web and digital creators that actually put everything into place. So it's strategy and execution all in one.
Who are your clients typically? What areas of the business world typically request your services?
So we predominantly work with B2B, many times in very niche industries, typically in construction. But when I say that, it's underground utilities. It's, like a roofing company that works with commercial builders. So our target audience is typically in the construction industry or B2B space. And then normally our average client revenue is about 5 million to 25, because anyone that's under 5 million typically is figuring out themselves using freelancers. Anyone over 25 million has already brought a whole team in-house.
Yeah, that
So
makes
that's our
sense.
sweet spot.
Yeah, that sounds like a good sweet spot to have. And, so obviously you cater to individuals who are, pretty much successful in what they're doing, and you just try to help them take it up a notch
Yeah. And scale it.
and scale it. I want to ask you another question, and this kind of just came to me. I'm a firm believer that the past can be our greatest teacher, while at the same time it's important to be living in the present moment. I don't know if you've had an opportunity to look back in terms of the past that you've had, but what has that tumultuous past, I think, taught you about yourself? And what skills do you believe you have developed as a result of the challenges you've experienced?
That is a beautiful question. I think the number one thing that most people see is resilience. But what I like to call it is post-traumatic wisdom. And it's because I took the experiences and I wasn't just resilient through them. I actually now use them to empower others to find their voice and find the courage to share their stories.
That is beautiful. And tell us how you do that with other individuals who want to request your services or just simply talk with you about struggles that they're having in their own lives.
Yeah. So I typically do a complimentary one-to-one call, whether it's with a new client or whether it's with someone who just has a story to share. And then I connect the dots and identify the resources that we both have or get them in touch with the right resources. So that's normally how I start those relationships.
And I could see where your skills in marketing can help that too, because as a marketer, you have to really be aware of resources that can help individuals, refine their brand, get the word out. So I think that collaborative piece is really cool because I think as coaches, as clinicians, one of the things that gets overlooked is the ability for us to provide resources. Individuals can't begin to understand what they need to do to change unless we give them the resources to do that. So I'm glad that you emphasize
Yes.
that.
Because a lot of times I wanted to save. And when you save, you sacrifice something.
Hmm.
And so instead, giving them the tools and the resources allows them to feel empowered and take their own journey at their own pace.
Yeah, and I think in the beginning for me, when I was a therapist, my initial reaction was I wanted to try to save everybody. But then
Yes.
I realized with mentoring and my own experience that the more we can empower individuals to take responsibility for themselves, the more they're going to be successful. If we start taking responsibility for them, that's what they're going to expect. And they're
Yes.
not going to empower themselves to do what they need to do. And the other thing is I never give advice, Serena. You know why? Because if I give you advice and it messes up, who do you blame? You blame me. And
Yes.
then that keeps you stuck longer because you're blaming me. But the bottom line, you didn't have to take that advice. But the other thing as a coach or as a clinician is up to me to say, look, this is a suggestion. I'm going to give you a variety of different
Yes.
things. You choose. And
You
this
have
way,
to put it back in their court.
yeah, absolutely. And that's the difference between fixing and facilitating.
100%. I think the other part of that is you can provide resources, You can provide tools, techniques, but you cannot heal someone. They can only heal themselves.
Yeah. You also have a coaching practice in addition to what you do with Pulse Marketing?
I do.
So when do you sleep?
Oh, I actually love sleeping, so I never sacrifice that.
Oh, well,
But I have a complimentary coaching. It's a CEO roundtable for entrepreneurs. And we meet the second Tuesday of every month for about 2 hours. And the entire 2 hour period is just to process real life issues that each of them are facing with like minded peers in the room. And so I also facilitate that.
I think that's pretty cool. And, a lot of times we see individuals' lives from the outside and we think they have it so great, but we're not privy to their private lives. And
Yeah.
the public persona, particularly in business, and I think in Hollywood, is so much different than what goes on in private. Um,
Yes.
so
It
I,
is feast or famine when you own a business. And so a lot of times, every decision is fear based. And so
Mhm.
you have to cut through the fear in order to really see, what options are available for you to get out of the situation that you're in. And so the reason it's a complimentary virtual roundtable is because I had invested so much time finding the right mentors and facilitators. And my mentor um, offered to do it with me. And so now we offer this to entrepreneurs nationwide.
Yeah, I think it's necessary because with the state of the economy right now, the pressures to succeed, particularly small businesses, the pressures for them to succeed, and they're not going to achieve their goals through a fear-based strategy or by letting fear govern them. It's got to be more, I think, collaboration, more in terms of teaching them how to facilitate without fear, motivation, not through fear. When I was being supervised by some inept supervisors, they tried to motivate me through fear. That never worked with me.
Of
So
course.
if they looked at, they would say, Dave, if we don't get our bed utilization rate up to 90%, we're going to close. And they kept saying that to me for the 10 years of the time that I was working in the addiction channel. We never closed. So that approach never works. Don't motivate me through fear. Just give me some objectives, empower me to help you reach those objectives. And based on my own personality, based on my own organizational philosophy, in terms of how to get things done, and then just leave me alone so I can do it. That's how I think leadership should work. It should be collaborative and inspirational.
Yes. And it's cutting through your narratives, right? So the
Mhm.
narratives are what really creates the fear. It's cutting through that. So you have clarity to make decisions without those emotions driving your behavior.
All right, I got a surprise question for you. So whenever you're ready, I will hit you
I'm
with it.
ready.
If you could create the perfect day, not for anybody else, but just for yourself, tell our audience what that perfect day would look like for you.
Oh, I'm going to sound like a typical woman right now. But my birthday is actually coming up, and I have created the perfect day. My birthday is on Saturday, and I am going to fly by myself to St. Thomas, and I am going to have a weekend getaway where I just take time for me. Peace, quiet, calm, the ocean, and just being present in those moments is really what matters.
Happy future birthday.
Thank
And
you.
that sounds like a wonderful.
46. 46.
You could have really just knocked me over with a feather when you told me you were 46, because I would never have guessed that because you look much younger than 46.
Why, thank you.
Well, you're welcome. And I also remember my mother aged pretty well too. She was 77, but if you looked at her, you would have never known it. You've left us with a lot of good information, a lot of good tips, strategies for not only surviving, but thriving. You've been very transparent with your own history, which I know I appreciate, my audience appreciates. But I'm going to ask you, if you want our audience to remember just one thing from our conversation today, Serena, what would that be?
So, one of my favorite quotes is, you don't have to set yourself on fire to keep others want.
I like that. Now you have me intrigued.
So a lot of times we think we have to sacrifice our own needs to serve others. And we do it to the extent of our health. And as mothers, as entrepreneurs, as business owners, as wives, as friends, we feel like we have to pour into everyone.
Yep.
But it does not mean that we have to set ourselves on fire to keep all of them warm. We still have to really focus on being healthy within, healing ourselves before we can heal the world.
Well, and also having the courage to set boundaries with those people that we love to say, this is what I need to recharge, because if I haven't filled my cup and my cup is empty, I can't fill your cup. But a lot of times we feel guilty setting those boundaries because we think we're becoming selfish, but we're not becoming, we're taking
It's
care of
the
ourselves.
opposite.
Yes, it
Yeah.
is. We're taking care of ourselves. We're becoming selfless to ourselves. So,
Yes.
Serena, my last question for you. If people want to get in touch with you, purchase your book, find out about your CEO Roundtable, what's the best way for them to do that?
So you can literally go to serenamastin.com. That's my author website. Or you can go to pulsemarketingteam.com and you'll be able to find all of that there. The link to Amazon to buy the book and all the information.
And I will make sure that all your contact information gets into the episode notes before we go live. So, Serena, thank you so much for just a lovely conversation today. I truly enjoyed spending time with you. And when your second book is getting close to being published, please let me know. I'd love to have you back for a part 2.
Thank you. I'm so grateful for you. And thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And with that, that's a wrap on another episode of the Teaching Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Dave Roberts, wishing you peace.